Hi gang, so today I'm going to start talking a little more about research and methodologies, which you're going to have to learn to do a lot of these different techniques in the scientific world we deal with and to create reports for your future bosses. These are all methodologies and things that are important to us and scientifically have to be carried out in a manner that is the same so it's repeatable. That way we can always find out, or someone else can find out, whether our data and our analysis is correct. So let's look at this journey a little bit deeper and talk about what it actually means, more importantly to us, as participant observations. Back in the early 1900s, ethno methodology was derived from an anthropological types of studies. An important person was Alfred Schutz. His father was a medical doctor and a scientist, and he wanted to study people on a psychological perspective that his father thought was goofy. So, generating from the late 1800s through here, he came up with the idea of phenomenology. And more importantly, phenomenology is the social world. And this is a lot about how we look at things. So, his German scientist father kind of created this methodology for him without realizing it as he watched how patients reacted to different medicines or the way he asked him to change their lifestyles and behaviors so their health would increase. And Alfred brought this into our world and the studies, and he knowingly saw the anthropological studies, saw that there was a way for us to move out of the science field and the health industry into the science fields in everyday life and in cultures, our social worlds. So the idea of phenomenology is, in essence, it's our experiences. It's what we use to make up the world and how we understand it. It's three different types. It's contemporaries, the things that are kind of happening now, or the predecessors, things that happened before, like his father's experiments and observations, and how he used this to create the contemporaries. And then the successors are the things that we gain in our life and ingrain into the way we change ourselves to promote the scientific method or the behaviors we want with our users. Husserl's sin idea, not the traditional sin because he was German, it has a meaning of distinct human action. Or what are the human actions? What do they mean? If I use my mouse to do this, what does that mean? Or if I'm looking and searching, what does that mean to users or to people? If I'm reading a book, what does that mean? If I'm reading a book particularly on user task analysis, does it mean I'm trying to learn something? I'm confused. If this action is left or right, does it mean I'm looking or searching for something? The Verstehen is the understanding of that action, which is obviously the yin and yang effect. So we see an action. I try to click, do, whatever. I need to be able to understand the action scientifically and repeat the same methodologies to say that I'm right and see if other users or people are doing the same actions. Think about a coffee shop. We go up to the counter, we order the coffee. Most of us take a step back and watch. This is an ingrained social cultural idea. Same things happens with interfaces. What we're doing is we're learning a social action, a standpoint on how we are behave in society. This creates the problem when we have to look at the past, the present, and future behaviors if we're thinking about correcting them or changing them. This sets up our scientific problems. If we modify, say, the way an interface looks, in the past, people were used to it. Presently, it's sort of a problem we see. Maybe it's a cultural. So what are the future behaviors going to be out of this? These are all things and questions that create those problems that we have to look at. Harold Garfinkel's study changed all this and grew from them. The Ethno Methodology. It's a very intricate type of observation. It's one of the things that I follow and trained in. And his idea was everything has rules. So he wanted to take this life to where the anthropologists would go and study tribes like the Yanomamo or others in the deep jungle, to where they go and inhabit this unknown area and have to learn all the culturals and rules and rituals social behavior patterns by being ingrained in that culture for a long time to the city dwelling, to the inner parts, to where we can translate that into things that we use in society as a natural routine. And he's decided that these are almost like games, and every game has a rule, and every area has a rule. The social rules are the movements that construct classes or actions. The routine actions and rationales are actions that are pieces that become so commonplace that we don't even think about them. We just advance and move. So his idea kind of grew out of Schutz's rational choice and the common sense actions that we create today in every type of motion that we utilize throughout every adventure we do, whether it's working with a computer or socially interacting in public, buying a cup of coffee, ordering a pizza through the phone. So Gregory Bateson was one of the next, and I'm going to skip ahead a few years to get to this idea, to where he started saying this is the steps of the ecology of mind. There's two different types: the ethos, which causes the behavior, the ethos that culture structures that behavior. And from this, he got this idea of hunches, or what we call scientific guesses today. I think this is going to happen, and we observe and we watch and we can draw conclusions from. He said a lot of these behaviors came from the past. There are experiences, what the group brought out in us, or our family. Think about going to church. Most of us have gone there. There's a set of rules and rituals that we standardize, and how our actions are engaged. And we learn about this, and we change our personalities and modify our norms to actually stay in consistency or standardize to these groups and behaviors. And we learn these through hunches, because if you do a wrong action in church, what do you get? Usually spanked afterwards by your father, or shunned, or a bad look from the preacher maybe. Clifford Geertz was a follower of Bateson, Schutz, and Garfinkel specifically. And he looked really deeply at these cultures and saying he can apply the Ethno Methodology. And he came out of this the idea of a theory of culture through thick descriptions. And thick descriptions mean very detail-orientated of actions. These are rituals of life and society, or social actions. The rituals from the culture and the norms. From his idea, he went back into those areas of interest, and he looked at cultures and the way they associate with different norms and different perspectives, and how they take inventions and innovations and they apply that to their society. So essentially he was an anthropologist who went into ethnography, and what we come up with today, and what I am a trained ethnographer. From him, Irving Goffman was one of the greatest people, and you heard me say about frames before, and these are methods once you have a set of series or prescribed norms and rules to look at this and say, okay, this person's doing this, what does it mean? And we learn this through organization of the meanings and the experiences. They have keys that he called them, or forms to indicate that. And they come from our informant. There might be a strip, he liked to call them, these little slices or frames of activity. Think about how we use the mouse with our hand, or we use the arrows to move forward or back. These are all slices of activities that we can catalog and create and watch and identify how users do things or people engage. We also fabricate things a lot of times. We try to change them to the way we want them, or we use them for a method to deceive. These are also frames of activities. There are personal choices, our roles in the actions. One of the most interesting people was Spradley. In 1980, he came up with the idea, which most of us use today in a scientific format, for looking at the way people interact with interventions. It's called a participant observation. And he looked at people and called them informants, because he would watch them specifically. He looked at different aspects, such as a bar situation. He wanted to understand how people learn to respect or disrespect cocktail waitresses. And from this, he would sit nightly and watch the people. And if gradually he gained friendship with some of the waitresses and started asking them to be informants, kind of secretive, telling us these cues, these meanings of the actions. We do this today with the same thing of how we do user task analysis on computers and watch users in their environments, just like you would go to an office space to learn the problems associated with applying a system. Or once the system's in, what the actions of the users are to understand if it's working and communicating correctly or if it's causing a cultural problem or a social problem. Just to give myself a bug, my dissertation back in 2015 kind of changed this. I came up with the theory of with my advisor of agile ethnography, and this is where I can flow and change. I can go into a situation that I'm already commonly interested in and know a lot about, and in a short manner of time gain access to informants and participants, we'll call them too. And I created focus groups to learn deeper meanings where I asked them, if this is what you're doing with this computer and this iPhone, what does it mean? What are you doing? If you're twittering, why are you twittering so much? Does it have a meaning? And I looked at this to discover whether or not using these focus groups and these informants, if what I saw with inventions and innovations was actually correct. So it's a sense in-member checking is a scientific term. I used my participants after I saw the observations and I asked them, just like a UTA exam, what are you doing? Why did you do this? And I tried to apply my meaning, my hunches, my thick description to what they were doing and check and see if it was correct. So inside of doing these, because we're going to start moving towards learning how to do user task analysis and evaluation and scientific methods, there's 5 key issues. Setting goals and understanding the user's goals. Identifying participants. Understanding what a sample is. A convenience sample will be the one we use. There's many other ones, but convenience is a sample that's located near you and conveniently in the same culture. I.e., we'll use probably our peers, our students that are in the same classroom or in the school system. There's a snowball to where you can actually sample one person and ask that person to share this with somebody else so that they can take the sample or the survey. So there's many of different types of samples, but we'll focus on the convenience to where, just like its name, it's right around you. You already have a relationship with the participants. We don't have to get a relationship by spending tons of time with them. They have a trust factor with us. We will use triangulation to make sure our data is correct. We will do 3 to 5 people, 5 predominantly, in most cases you do in user task analysis. And then you will go back and we'll check it again with another set of 5. And we'll go back and ask these participants if we've seen the right things and understand them by doing a think out loud participation, observation, and a user task analysis where we actually ask the users to talk out loud when we see things and ask them questions. Why did you use the mouse and go over here? Why are you scrolling? Are you lost? And they'll stop and say, yeah, I'm looking for setting goals. And then in the end, we'll do a pilot study. From our findings, we'll try something and talk about it and bring them back to the user and say, hey, here's what we think you want. Is this correct? And they'll test it again, and we can do this on a simple piece of paper before we even consider changing or modifying any design in an interface. So some of the things to think about, because we're talking about people. The International Review Board, an IRB, is the one that sanctions our scientific research. We won't need to go through this. We're just learning in classroom and not publishing. But in them, they ask you to explain everything you're going to do with a human to make sure you never intervene or hurt them mentally, physically, in any way. And if you're paying them, you have to explain this. But also, because of the federal laws and regulations, the federal regulations on illegally recording or videotaping people without their knowledge, the federal wiretap regulation states that you have to have people sign off on a document saying if you're using a video recorder audio that they know and understand that they are being recorded, or you break federal law. We will do this too. Still cameras are different. You can just ask regular permission, and the IRB's asks that you tell us that. You could use screen capture software, just like I'm doing here, and it's called Movia, and it captures the entire screen and talks to it so you guys can hear my voice. And you can do this when you're doing your user task analysis and go back and re-watch what the person did on the screen. Did they move left? Did they do right? Did they go up? Did they go back? Did they go up? No, I like it. I don't like it. And this records, and you can count the times that somebody did this or clicked or looked or got lost. We'll do interviews as well after we go back and ask these questions we don't understand for in-member checking. Or we might bring in the whole group of users and ask them at once. Here's what we've seen. Is this correct? And let them give us a rich detail and more meanings. We'll use Likert scales if we send out a survey or we go back to them to survey what they think. And a Likert scale is usually set up on 5 to 7 different scale settings. The first will be strongly agree, agree, none, I have no opinion, disagree, or strongly disagree, which then we can quantify in a quantitative analysis method to understand whether or not our measures are correct. There's many ways to turn everything into numbers. We can count how many clicks. We can count how many times we ask the person if they're frustrated. We can watch visual cues and see how many times a person types in, types over, uses a letter T, and count these. These are all actions that are observable, including getting up and walking away from a computer. We're getting frustrated. How many times? These can all be calculated quantitatively as well. So we're going to start learning a lot of this process, and we're going to be using the observation, the ethnography. We'll be using 5 or so participants to learn a user task analysis, to where you'll set a person up at a computer and you'll ask them a series of questions to walk through, which would be a goal. Maybe it is find me Google, and see how they go through the process of opening up a browser and selecting it. And these are all data points that we'll catalog and learn. And from there you have questions about their frustrations and anxieties and what you can do to alleviate it and change an interface design. And we'll use these same participants, which will be our informants, to help us guide changes and make a paper model or prototype to one of the things we design down the road for our coursework. So start thinking now just about some of these things, about where your sample will be, what an ethnography is. Look a little deeper and read some more. Maybe you want to go in and read Geertz's piece and enjoy some of it.